Joining me now to discuss, Christine Quinn, the Executive Committee Chair for the New York Democratic Committee, and Melik Abdul, a Republican strategist for us. Thank you so much for being here this morning. All right, first to you, Christine. How do Democrats address constituents who say, if Democrats capitulate and do not get anything when it comes to this health care subsidy, why'd they do it? What was it all for?
That's going to be a very hard question to answer if the vote in December is basically a vote to raise people's premiums or to have people lose their health care. I understand the vice that Democrats felt they were in, health care, food on the table, people not getting paid, but this deal is the equivalent of ice in winter. We haven't gotten anything. From the very same people who said we're going to repeal and replace years ago, we say we got to vote. Not what are we voting on, not are we extending, not are we keeping. I don't think this was a good deal, and I stand with people like Chuck Schumer who said no, we're not going to vote for this.
Yeah, you are, in this sense, there's sort of a rock and a hard place because there are people that need food assistance. There are people who are not being paid, who are working like the air traffic controllers and the TSA and on and on and on. But then on the other side, you have people like this woman I want to introduce you and Melik to. Melik, I want you to listen to one of the recipients of Obamacare who says that if the subsidies are not passed, her health insurance is going to triple and she has cancer. Listen.
I have to face the reality that I am probably going to become a late-stage cancer patient who's uninsured.
If you don't have insurance, what will that mean for your scans and your treatments and your oxygen?
I won't have any of those. Life's going to get a lot harder.
Life is going to get a lot harder. Her life literally in danger there. Our Gabe Cohen bringing that to us. The latest bill attaches $153 billion to fund the Department of Veterans Affairs and Pentagon infrastructure. It's bipartisan. Both sides, both groups want that. Why not just go ahead and fund the health care subsidies along with it, everything else?
Yeah, if you go back and look at the healthcare subsidies, the reason that we are here is because Democrats, they actually proposed, well, this was part of the plan, that it was supposed to sunset this year when they passed it in 2021. I believe probably the expectation was that Kamala Harris would be president of the United States. That did not happen. Democrats could have they could have had the government open, they could have had the SNAP benefits funding, and we could have been having the conversation about healthcare. Democrats decided to not play ball over and over again. So I'm glad that we seem to now be moving towards the government reopening. But it really does seem like at this point that the Democratic Party, they were intent on being very political in this and exacting as much pain from the American people as possible. I'm glad we're now at a point that the government seems like it's going to be reopened. It should have never been closed in the first place.
Melik, what do you say to Democrats who look over and go, but Republicans are in control of the House, they're in control of the Senate, they're in control of the presidency, and the pain is largely on their heads as well?
Yeah, well, look, I hold both sides accountable. At the end of the day, as you mentioned, the Republicans are in control of the White House and in control of Congress. But you don't have 60 votes. That's the whole purpose of the filibuster. And Democrats have said over and over again that they didn't care about Donald Trump's threatening to, withhold SNAP benefits or firing government workers. They were willing to exact as much pain as possible to really get to the same place that we were at the beginning, which is that we're going to debate the health care portion of this at a later date. That's what Republicans wanted all along. I'm glad Democrats are now joining them.
The president could have kept SNAP going. In President Trump's first term, when there was a shutdown, he kept SNAP going. The decision to exact pain to make people choose between food and life-saving health care was a Republican choice. And I wish more Democrats had stood and said, no, Americans can't choose between literally two things that keep you alive.
I do want to ask you, Melik, about Trump, something else that he's done. While all this is going on, you have such just pain and frustration by the American people. Donald Trump has decided to pardon a long list of political allies for their support over these sort of alleged plans to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Why is this okay for him to say, okay, I'm going to pardon anyone who was on my side, including Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows?
Because he has the power as president of the United States to do it. I don't think that anyone should be surprised that Donald Trump issued these pardons. In January, Donald Trump pardoned over probably, I think, maybe 1,200 people that were connected to what happened on January 6th at the Capitol. So I'm not surprised here. I expected him to do it.
But this
I
isn't
wouldn't
about
be surprised
being surprised. Why is it okay? Why is it okay to pardon people who were responsible for injuring 140 police officers? Why is it okay to pardon these folks who have charges in state courts as well? He cannot pardon them from those. Why is it okay? That he can do it is not disputed.
Yeah, well, I'm one of those Republicans who said at the time that I didn't agree with all of the pardons for people who actually committed violent acts on January 6th, but he can do it because he did. There have been, even going back to the Clinton years and before, conversations about pardons where people have been critical of presidents, irrespective of party, who've made pardons that have been controversial. So this is Donald Trump being consistent with that. But no, whether or not he should do it, no, you could say no, he shouldn't have pardoned them, but he can. But this is only an issue for people who are really in opposition to Donald Trump, not those of us. And I'll probably say many of the people who even voted for him, we don't care. We care about putting food on the table, not Donald Trump's pardons.
How do you respond to that, Christine?
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's lots of things we all can do, but we don't do them because they're not the right thing. And going back and now saying Donald Trump just followed the incorrect pardons that Bill Clinton did, it's kind of ridiculous. It's history and far in the rearview mirror. He pardons cronies. He pardons people who support him, who say nice things about him, and he pardoned people in this case and in the case of January 6th, people who are attempting to erode the foundations of our democracy.
Christine Quinn, Melik Abdul, always a good conversation with the two of you. Thank you both. Appreciate it.